Dun 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 dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Alright. Alright, I'm Reed Ross. This is my last video for my race and ethnic relations class, in which I'll be presenting my website to an individual. Meet Cody Franco, my roommate. Say hi, Cody.
Hey, how you doing?
I said say hi.
Hi.
Okay. Alright, so I believe Cody has some questions about Asian Americans. Don't you, Cody?
Yeah. So, like in our society, what kind of struggles do Asian Americans face?
Well, I think a really big struggle that Asian Americans face, there's kind of two parts, is that there's this model minority myth where everyone expects Asians to be really smart and really good at school, really hard workers, and for them to be like doctors and lawyers. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, like you always think of them
Yeah, you always
getting
think of
big
like
scholarships,
getting big scholarships, always getting A's in school, having
And
really angry mothers who always yell at them. Yeah, you always think of that.
Yeah.
However, that's not the case. That may be a little bit more true with like Chinese and Japanese Americans, who you do see more getting better scholarships, better grades like that. However, there's a lot of other Asian ethnicities like Korean, Hmong, Lao, and Thai, and Vietnamese and Filipino, who, while you do see some that go and work really hard and do really well, however, there's a really high dropout rate in high schools. I believe on my website it showed that there was, I think, a 36% dropout rate among sub-Asian cultures like Lao, Thai, Hmong. There's a really huge dropout rate.
Okay.
So that's kind of like a little myth that's debunked. And then the other major problem that I think they face is the idea of pan-ethnicity. So when you think Asian American, what do you think of?
Well,
Do you think of like a Chinese person
Yeah,
or a Japanese person?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what do you think of? Is it
A Chinese person.
a Chinese person?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's what everyone thinks. It says all Asian Americans are Chinese. That's what a lot of people think. But like I said, there's over a dozen different cultures, a dozen different countries that people come from.
What about like people in India? Are they considered Asian American?
No, they would not be considered Asian Americans. They're from like a sub-Asian. Some people would consider them, but for the purpose of my website and what I was doing,
Okay.
no.
Okay. I gotcha.
Good question though. Yeah, so.
When did like a large majority of Asian Americans start immigrating to America?
Well, Asian Americans have like been here since like the 1600s, like coming here and trading for stuff as well, and sailing in on ships. A lot of Chinese and Japanese Americans started immigrating to the U.S. during the 1800s. Like you always see in like these Western movies, like all the people building the railroads are Chinese.
Right. Yeah.
You see that. That was actually a real thing. Chinese were used a lot for like mostly menial jobs like cooking, cleaning, and heavy labor.
Were they slaves?
No, they weren't slaves,
Okay.
but they were like they were a minority, so they were given lower jobs. However, the most immigration that we've seen is post World War II. That's when a lot of these sub-Asian cultures started immigrating more to the U.S., like Lao, Thai, Vietnamese, and Hmong. A lot of those cultures started immigrating after World War II was over.
Okay.
There were a lot of borders that kind of got freed up. A lot of those countries started going through civil wars and communist takeovers.
And
they wanted a better life, so they immigrated to the U.S. Also to flee persecution.
What about Japanese? Did they
Japanese
migrate after? Because I know the conflicts with World War II.
There's been I feel it's been pretty steady, but the highest amount of immigration was like in the 1890s
Of Japanese.
of Japanese American, 1890s and early 1900s.
Okay. Oh, okay. What? Didn't we cover that? What exactly is? What constitutes an Asian American?
So, what an Asian American is, we talked about this a little bit before,
Okay.
but I'd just like to clarify this point. An Asian American is someone who comes from Asia,
Yeah.
mostly from Eastern Asia.
Okay.
So China, Japan, it goes as far north as Japan and Korea and Mongolia, all the way down to like Thailand, Vietnam,
Malaysia.
those, yeah, kind of Malaysia, a little bit of Indonesia as well.
What about the Philippines?
Yes, it would constitute the Philippines as well.
Oh, okay. So Filipinos are considered Asian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Which actually really confused me because, like, I knew the Spanish had colonized that area,
Right.
so I had kind of associated Filipinos with like Latin American cultures.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and then when I started doing this, I kind of figured out. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, it's interesting that they don't consider, or they've considered Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
What
They're-
about
they're
New
like-
Zealanders?
What?
What about what?
New Zealanders.
No, they're Oceanics. They're Polynesian.
But like they consider Filipino or Philippine
Philippine, yeah.
people, but they don't constitute like people
India,
from India. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of more on like the Asian subcontinent.
Okay.
So
Asian
that- And it's like, it's a large enough ethnicity unto itself,
that they consider it
overbuilt,
different.
that
Okay.
you would consider it a different ethnicity.
Alright.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, those are some pretty good questions. You must have taken a lot of time to think those up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I put a lot of thought into those, didn't you?
Tons.
Okay, so let's move on, and I'm just going to teach you a little bit about Asian Americans, kind of just moving a little bit beyond, like, when you were talking about like the conflicts that they had in society. So one of the things that we talked about in class a lot was called social constructionism, and that's where a cultural product or an idea that someone has suddenly takes root in society and becomes its own norm. Like, for example, why do people shave off their body hair? Like back hair and chest hair for men,
'Cause it's attractive
and
to
leg hair for
women.
women. And why do women shave off their leg hair?
'Cause it's attractive to,
I mean,
attractive to men. It's just
Like, it grows naturally, it's an unnatural
yeah.
thing to shave it off, but why do we do so?
because we deem it attractive as society.
Exactly. Someone somewhere along the line decided that that was attractive, and I see why. Yeah, they decided that it was attractive, so it becomes. It starts with objectification, where all of a sudden that idea of shaving off your body hair becomes objectified. Then it's internalized, where we start kind of thinking about it as like, yeah, okay, we get it. It kind of expands on, takes on a little bit of a life of its own. And then the last stage is externalization, where the product suddenly,
Everyone does it.
yeah, suddenly it starts dictating human behavior. It's the same thing with race. Did you know that racism was actually invented in like the 1600s?
Where in Europe
Sweden.
or where? In Sweden.
The whitest country on earth,
Yeah.
Sweden. You know, some Swedish philosopher actually coined the term racism and race. Before it was just like, you're darker, I'm lighter. And,
Oh, so
okay.
that's when the word became a word.
Yes, that's when
Oh,
racism really came to be, and it went through that process of social constructionism. It suddenly, people were like, okay, he's black, I'm white, and I'm better than he is, for some reason, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. I'm black, not really. You're white, so you're stupid. And suddenly, that's where racism is born. It's from society. Society created that.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't come around naturally. So, do you have any questions about that or what we talked about?
No, that makes sense. I mean, that's when in the 1600s, that's when the name was like coined. But
Mhm.
before that existed, they just didn't have like a name
Yes.
or something for it.
They needed a justification for slavery.
I got you.
Mhm.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. So another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, it's called the Matrix of Domination.
Okay.
Yes, it's kind of a Marxist theory that's created by, that has emphasis from like Karl Marx, and it talks about how there's all these factors involved in keeping people down, like keeping them below the poverty line, occupying the lowest rung of society. And like we watched a little video in class about this family from Kentucky, super poor, like they just didn't really do anything to move themselves beyond their poor level.
Were they white or
white? Yeah.
White trash.
That's racist.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I believe in white trash. My cousins.
Rednecks.
Yes. I met some rich rednecks. But yeah, it's essentially that they were white, and like these factors include there's like housing to keep them down, working conditions, media, crime, all these different things, like recidivism rates, which is the rate of going back to prison.
Okay.
So yeah,
Dun dun dun.
Like after you've been there.
yes.
Okay.
So like you go to prison once, you come out, all of a sudden you find you can't really get a job. It's really hard for released prisoners to get a job. So they can't get a job. They still need to survive. So what would you do?
Resort to crime again.
Resort to crime again. Peddling drugs, stealing, assault, rape. I don't know.
Where would that get you?
What would that get you?
Anyway.
But yeah, all these things are designed to keep people in certain niches of society. Occasionally someone can move up, but it takes a lot of effort on their part.
Right.
Like you see those all the time in the news. It's like, oh, this guy was born in the ghettos and now he's the CEO of this company. One of the easiest ways to move up is sports.
Yeah.
Being really good at basketball or football or soccer.
But that's even not that easy.
Even that's not easy at all.
Is there like a term for that? Kind of like the glass ceiling in business, but like for racism?
It's called upward social mobility.
And that's kind of like means glass ceiling? Kind of like you're stuck in their situation?
What? Stuck in the situation?
Yeah.
That's called the matrix of domination.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not
So it's
being able
like-
to move up in society.
Yeah, you look up. I get what the glass ceiling means. Like you look up and you see there's nothing there, but in reality there is a ceiling there and
Right.
you can't move up.
Because they won't be able to get jobs. Like,
Yes.
they know why, but
Yeah,
though.
so it requires education.
Just like
Yeah.
women know why they can't get jobs. That's what the glass ceiling is.
Yes.
Yes.
Moving on, yes. So these things apply fairly well to Asian Americans. Like for housing, at least, it says, on average, Asian American homebuyers are told about 15.5% less homes and are shown 18.8% less homes than non-Hispanic white buyers. So if you were Asian and you and your Asian wife were trying to move into a nicer neighborhood, you would be shown like 15% less houses. So like out of 100 houses, you would only be shown about 85 of them.
Like through a realtor, they would show you less houses.
They would
because
show
of-
you less, and they try and show you houses that were kind of away from more affluent neighborhoods. Like they try and keep you away.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And it's the same for renters. They're told about like 9.8% less, and they're shown 6.6% less. Yeah, so while they can move into like nicer homes, they're just not given the same opportunities to do so.
Find the right one.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, well, I mean, it is kind of stereotypical, but usually, like Asian people are really well educated. Well, some of them. I'm not all of them. I'm not saying all of them, but like the ones that they probably make really good money and can afford,
Yeah.
higher housing.
And going back to the stereotypes, it's like, how do you see Asian Americans finding jobs?
What do you mean?
Like, do you think it's easy for an Asian American to get a job?
Are you saying are they educated?